Hello, it's Christine Rochelle with the Spend It Like You Mean It podcast. And I have been asked by several people how to listen to my podcast, people who ordinarily aren't listening to them. So if you are someone who knows how to listen to podcasts and has a big list of favorites, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and comment and let all of the other people know what your favorites are. I didn't listen to podcasts until, I don't know, maybe a year or two ago. I just wasn't into it. I knew about them and didn't care about them. So once I started listening and my friends recommended a few really good ones, that's when I started listening. So for those of you who don't know and maybe have never been exposed to them, I'm hoping that this video will not only expose you to my own podcast, but all of the ones that you might really enjoy besides that. So I have a few notes. If you see me looking down, that's what I'm looking at because I want to make sure not to leave anything out. So the first thing is, what is a podcast? My parents, they were not familiar with that. They don't use smartphones anymore. They just didn't need it. So it's kind of like a radio show, back in the day when you watch that movie, A Christmas Story, and the kid is listening to Little Orphan Annie. It's a little bit like that, but there's so many different kinds. There are people who are doing stories, so you can listen to ongoing stories acted out by professionals. You can listen to real life docudramas. You can listen to interviews, live interviews. Some people record their podcast live. You can listen to famous people, not so famous people. Pretty much if there's a topic out there that you're interested in learning something about, they're out there. I like learning about so many different things. I love listening to the Bulletproof podcast. That guy talks about biohacking and different ways to stay healthy. And Liam Vogel's podcast, who I've recommended to several of my friends who are interested in learning about keto. Or NPR puts out some really high quality podcasts. And then there are some others that tell stories about what's happening. There's one called The City that talks about a guy who was doing he was a crime boss doing illegal dumping in Chicago. So there's all kinds of interesting things, which is why if you have some favorites, I'd love for you to share that with everyone else, because that's how I got started. My friend told me, oh, you should listen to such and such. Some of them were How I Built This, which is one of my favorites. And that is such a well-produced podcast that talks about how all of these different businesses got started, and it interviews the founders. So how to listen is the next biggest question. What most people who have a smartphone are going to do. So that's, you probably can't see it. Yeah, you can't see that. That's too bright. But there's a app on your iPhone, and it's purple with white circles and a letter I in the middle. So there is no way to show you that, but it looks a little bit like the Incredibles logo. But if you search on your phone, if you're on your phone's homepage on an iPhone and just swipe to the right, there should be a search option. Or if you scroll down, like slide everything down, you should have a search option and you can search podcasts. You can also search in your app store. So if you have an Android phone, an iPhone, or any other kind of phone, and you want to listen, there's different apps to listen in, like Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify. My podcast is in all of those, which is awesome. And then I found Android I had to submit separately to get onto an Android podcast. And so they have all kinds of different, you can listen on Pandora. I'm trying to pull up the websites here to help you out here. They also have on the Android Podcast Addict, Podcast Republic. Just search for podcasting apps and you'll find it. And most people will have submitted their podcasts to most of these different mediums. You can also listen on the web though. So if you don't have a smartphone, you can listen on the internet if you go to the website of some of these podcasts. So I know that a lot of them, like This American Life or How I Built This, they have their own website. I have my own website, spenditmeanit.com, where you can listen to the latest episode on the homepage, and you can listen to all of the past episodes and see all of the past show notes also on that page. And that's pretty common. You can also listen on your iPad if you want to do it that way, or a different kind of tablet. You just usually need an app, or the other thing you might need is what's called an RSS feed reader. That's not, I don't think, as common as just getting an app or just going to the website of something that you like and finding out more. I think the apps are easier if you're on a smartphone, but hey, if someone recommends something for you, just look it up on the internet and see if they have their own website where you can listen to the episodes live. If you are listening on your phone, you can often listen without downloading, or you can download it and then save it to listen later. So if you're in your car, or if you're working out, or doing something where you don't want to be fiddling with your phone, that's an option. Which of course brings me to the next thing is, most people say like, oh, I'm so busy, and I don't know about you, if I'm scrolling through Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, if that video is longer than 3 minutes, I'm probably not going to watch it, because that's just too much time during my surfing time. However, podcasts are meant to be something that are enjoyed kind of like a book or a radio program. Like if you like sports radio, there's going to be plenty of sports radio podcasts, and one person is going to give you that whole program. So if you really like a certain person, then you can find that person's program and listen to the whole thing, and there's no commercials necessarily, or there might be sponsored ads. But I think that, if you're listening to someone that you really appreciate, then listening to their sponsored ads helps them produce that. So, it's a value thing. Since my podcast is Spend It Like You Mean It, and it's about spending your money and your time like you mean it, I think that sometimes I don't mind listening to the ads, because I know that's giving revenue to the people, the amateur podcasters who are, they're making their living by doing some of these episodes. But other places that you might not have considered, if you're doing dishes, if you are cooking or folding laundry, that is my favorite place to listen, because it takes me so long to fold laundry. So I'll just put on a podcast and listen to that while I do my laundry. You might also listen to it, let's see, while you're headed to sleep. If you're falling asleep and you're kind of awake, and maybe, if you want to listen to that while your spouse is falling asleep, that's a great way to not have the light on. Also, if you are putting your children to sleep, you can put in your headphones and have something quiet going. Or if you just really want to bore them to sleep, you could put on a really boring podcast. I don't know. It's an option. Another thing you might not realize if you're new to this is that you can fast forward by small increments, like 15 seconds or 30 seconds, depending on the app that you're listening to. So if you're listening in the podcast app that comes on the iPhone, that fast forwards in increments of 30 seconds, and it rewinds in increments of 15 seconds. And I find myself rewinding a lot where maybe my mind started to wander, or I'm in traffic and I'm focused on that, and so I'll kind of hit the back button for a few seconds to figure out what I missed, or if they say something and I didn't quite understand it, which I think is pretty common when you're listening to someone for several minutes at a time, and they're talking and maybe they get a little rushed, or they're interviewing someone and the interview quality isn't great. Then you can back it up and play it a couple times, and then you can also, that 30-second fast forward, you can generally skip through ads if you want to. So if someone has some really annoying things, or if it's always the same ads, some of the podcasts that I have listened to in the past had the same ads every time, and it was super obnoxious. So I just fast forward through those. A lot of people will ask you to rate and leave reviews. I've heard mixed information about whether this is valuable. Of course, I think rating a podcast, like at least giving it, the stars that you appreciate. Everyone's asking you to rate it. They're assuming that you're going to give them a good rating. So I think that I find it helpful sometimes, but I think what's more important is it helps someone rank higher. So if they're trying to get discovered and get a bigger audience, those ratings help them rank higher, supposedly. And the reviews, kind of a similar thing. If someone, they've never heard this before and they want to hear this podcast, then that's a good chance to review it. Something I forgot is in the when you're playing a podcast, one of the beautiful things compared to radio is that you can listen at a different speed. So if I'm doing a podcast, my parents always told me I talk too fast, so I try really hard to slow down. But on episode 6, I was just getting over being sick for a week, and you can tell, and it kind of drags on a little bit. So there is a button at the bottom, and you can change the speed, and you can play it at halftime. So if someone's speaking really quickly and you want to slow it down, or you can play at 1.5 speed, which speeds it up a little bit and helps you get through it a little bit faster. So say you have a 15-minute drive and you know that this podcast is a little long, but you want to hear all of it, you can speed it up a little bit. And you can speed it up to 2 times as well, although that just sounds weird to me. Anyway, so I hope that helps. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. Because I have a Facebook page, I feel like I have an audience that, maybe you've never listened to a podcast before, but you are wanting to support mine. And I wanted to give you just a little breakdown of how to do it, because so many people ask, and I think they feel like they're out of the loop or something and they've missed out. So I want you to know that several people have asked me because they just never have listened to podcasts before. So mine is Spend It Like You Mean It, and it is on the web. It's on Facebook. You can listen in Facebook when it first comes out, when it's first released. It releases the audio in the Facebook app, so you can listen within that and not even have to go anywhere, whether you're on a computer, your tablet, your phone, wherever. And then again, it's on most of the podcast apps as well. There are a couple apps that insist on, in their terms of service, which I actually do read, they insist on putting in, it's called mid-reel. They put in sponsorships or advertising mid-reel, and you have to agree that if they do that, you don't get any money from it. But a big part of my podcast is that I do not accept sponsorships. I am talking about ethical companies and ethical products and ethical business and spending your money with those companies. So in order to remain objective, I have decided that is one route I will not go, which is to accept sponsorships. And it makes my 20 minutes go a little faster, so you're not listening to a 1-minute break or something. But there might be a couple apps out there that I'm not in because of that reason. I didn't want to allow the app, like iHeartRadio. You can submit to iHeartRadio, but iHeartRadio will put ads at the beginning and end that they apparently make clear is not related to the content. But I can't deal with a mid-reel ad and have somebody think that I've gone back on what I said I would do. So if you have any interest in making a difference in the world, I would encourage you to check out my podcast, because that's what it's all about. It's all about making choices that are good for you, that are easy, that are practical, and helping you decide amongst the many, many different ways and different values and different things that you can support, or things that are supposed to be good. So if you're debating on, should I, buy this product from this company, it's supposed to be green, but it's wrapped in plastic, or, should I be eating this, ethically sourced chocolate? I do an episode on eggs because, I didn't even know all about the ins and outs of organic and cage-free and if it even makes a difference. So check out my podcast. It's at spenditmeanit.com. You can find it here on my Facebook page, and you can find it anywhere else. But also, if you found this useful, share it, and hopefully you can get some of your friends in on this new thing. So if you liked those old-fashioned radio shows, you might be in for a real treat. And hopefully, you can check out some of the ones like, there's one called Serial, like Serial, and it's all about a murder mystery, but I believe it is based on a true story. So if that kind of stuff, is something that you find entertaining, you're in for a real treat. So anyway, thanks so much for listening. I hope to get to hear from you soon. You can always email me or message me on here if you have any questions. Talk to you in my next episode. Bye.